Because a lot of people, I think their first impression when I say I write about jewelry is, huh? Huh? That's weird. You know, this business, as I learned early on, is just such a business of relationships. And it may be because the category of jewelry just demands trust.
I don't watch television, I watch the jewelry industry. Because it's also a soap opera, right?
You know, we've got greed and, you know, high stakes wealth and like thieves and robberies and all kinds of dramatic things. The jewelry industry promised me something a long time ago and it delivered over and over again.
So, Victoria Gomelski.
Hi, Elle.
And I said it right. I have seen you and known you, and I think the first time that I met you in person was in Tucson 2019. I know exactly what I was wearing, and I was doing a fireside chat, and I think you were overseeing.
There we go. During the during the JCK show in Tucson. Yes, that's it. That's it.
And I'd never been to the show before. So people think I'm really embedded in the industry in the United States because I started in New York City and I was there for the first 15 years of my career. But then I was in mainland China and Hong Kong for 10 years. So I've never been to
amazing.
I know, it's just crazy, right? So when I went to Tucson, I was so excited to meet you. I'd been consuming your articles and everything that you oversee and what you do. So, you know, I tried to not, you know, waste your time because you were running the entire thing. But I've got loads of questions about, you know, your trajectory and how you started in the jewelry industry. So can I ask you to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. No, thank you for asking. You know, it's a story I've shared a lot because it's just one of those stories. It's not like I came from a jewelry family or had any background in jewelry at all. It was the year 2000. So, you know, I'm dating myself. It's been a long time. It's been 22 years. And I had just finished graduate work at Columbia in New York City. I had done an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts in Nonfiction Writing. So it wasn't the journalism program. It was similar. It had shades of journalism in it, but it was a nonfiction program and I needed a job. I wasn't quite done with my thesis. It was the summer of 2000 in New York City or on the brink of the summer. And I just went on monster.com. So which was, I don't know if monster.com exists anymore, but this was the first wave it was Web 1.0. It was the first wave of online jobs. And there were more jobs than there were candidates to fill them. And I happened to see a posting that said luxury goods website seeks B2B writer, you know, to cover luxury. It really said nothing at all. And at the bottom, it didn't have a fax number. It didn't have a name or an email address. It just said, click here to forward your profile to this employer. And I had a profile on the site and I just was going through and I said, sure, click. And a few days later, I get a call from somebody named Lisa at JCK. And I'm thinking, JCK, what's JCK? And as it turns out, it was this B2B luxury goods website that I had applied for a couple of days ago without even knowing it. And it was owned by Fred Mowad. And Fred Mowad was the son of Robert Mowad, whose name a lot of people in the jewelry industry know because it graces the campus of GIA. It's GIA's Carlsbad campus.
Right.
And a Lebanese businessman had, I feel like 2 or 3 sons. Fred was one of them. Right. He was an entrepreneur. He was based in Bangkok and he had a lot of these Web 1.0 businesses. And one of them happened to be JCK. And it was a very early days attempt to get retailers to source inventory online. It's kind of laughable when you think about it, because even today that still doesn't happen that easily or well or often. And so this was 22 years ago. So clearly it was ahead of its time, still is, but they had an editorial portion. And I was hired by a man who turned out to be my mentor, Russ Shore. He was went on to work at GIA as an industry analyst. But prior to GIA, prior to this job at JCK, he'd actually been an editor, a diamond editor at JCK for many, many years. So, which is where I am now. So we kind of have these funny little overlapping circles. But Russ Shore hired me to be the pearl and watch editor for JCK. I knew nothing about watches, absolutely zero. I knew nothing about pearls. I didn't even know what a cultured pearl was. I had no idea. But I love travel, and Russ sort of enticed me and said, there'll be a lot of travel. And sure enough, within a month of starting, I was on my way to a pearl farm in Northern Australia, past Pali Pearl Farm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And it was just an enchanting experience. I stopped in Bangkok to meet the team.
Uh-huh.
I carried on via Brunei, and it was just the mere fact that the plane stopped in Brunei was sort of fascinating. Like,
How
not a place
exotic.
you expect to go.
Yeah.
Landed in Darwin, which is in the Northern Territories in Australia, and then carried on to this pearl farm, and
Wow.
then came back via Hong Kong to go to the pearl auctions. And all this again was the summer of 2000, and I was hooked. I was just absolutely
Wow.
hooked. That's all I needed. I thought I could get used to this because I'd done some traveling. I'd backpacked through Southeast Asia, I'd backpacked through Central America. And
Sure.
so I'd really gotten the travel bug. And so for me, jewelry was this incredible way to see the world. And it's 1,000 times, a million times over has proven, has made good on that promise that the jewelry industry sort of, promised me something a long time ago and it delivered over and over again. So that was how I got into the business. And just to finish that story, that website did not last very long because we were sort of on the brink of the first dot bomb. That dot bomb happened in the fall of 2000. And so I got laid off, maybe 8 months after I started.
Oh,
But
wow.
right away, National Jeweler, which was, and still is a trade publication, been around, I believe, since 1906, heard I was looking for a job and they hired me as their gemstone editor. So my first Tucson was actually 2001. I went as National Jeweler's gemstone editor.
Wow.
And that was the start.
Wow. Wow.
I know.
See, this is how old I am, that like 2001 still seems recent in my mind until I go, that was 20 years ago. Right? Is that right?
I know.
It doesn't even sound right
I
anymore.
know. It's been a
But
long,
so
long time.
then you switched to gemstone. You've done all this, like first of all, Pasquale. The IPO of my first jewelry business, which was before I started advising and my team advising people.
Yeah.
That we IPO'd on the Australian Stock Exchange.
Oh, wow.
So I spent a lot of time, from San Francisco to Singapore to Sydney.
Wow.
You like what I did with the alliterations there?
Notice.
But that was the first time I saw their flagship store, and
Oh, yeah.
just was blown away by Pasquale Pearl, just as an aside. But so you get this big pearl, they did the right thing, right? They put you right into the heart of it. You see a pearl farm, you go to pearl auctions, then
Yep.
you go to National Jeweler and you're the gemstone. I mean, talk about the most diverse category. Like, how did
Yes.
you get up to speed on that one?
There were a few people. So National Jeweler had a long line of editors that had come through. In fact, many either went on to JCK or still very much editors in this business today.
Yeah.
And so I called on a few past editors, including a woman who's still a dear, dear friend, Debbie Yannick. She
Okay.
had covered gemstones for many years, and she gave me a list of dealers. And she said, "Okay, when you go to Tucson, you go to Dana Shore to talk about tanzanite. You go to Barker and Co. to talk about tourmalines from Africa. You go to, and she basically rattled off these dealers, and she said, this is the guy for sapphires. This is the guy for, tourmalines. This is the guy for, I don't know, like
Yeah.
agates and things, whatever." And
Uh-huh.
so I just went down that list and I went to see people at my very first Tucson. Another man that I consider a mentor in the gem business, and he's very much still around, is Joe Menzie. He was involved with the ICA, the International Colored Gemstone Association, for years. And
Mhm.
he is a New York based dealer, and he walked me around my first Tucson, invited me to Little Abner's, which is a famous steakhouse that people still very much go to, and just introduced me. And, this business, as I learned early on, is just such a business of relationships. And those relationships I formed at that first Tucson and in the months that had preceded it when I was still at GemKey, those relationships still hold. I mean, I'm still friends and close with so many, if I haven't talked to them for 10 years, I could still call them up and say, "Hey, it's Victoria. I'd love to catch up." And, I assume and hope they would still take my calls.
I'm sure they would, but I wonder sometimes, because 1995 is when I started, so that was
Oh, yeah. So just a few years before.
years ago, and I often wonder, are other industries like this too?
I
No.
don't think quite this much. I mean, I don't have an experience with so many other industries, but I know that a lot of people come from fashion, or there are overlapping circles with the fashion industry. And what I hear time and again is that fashion is a lot more competitive, a lot more bitchy, a lot, there's just not that intimacy, that closeness, that trust. And it may be because the category of jewelry just demands trust. You need to trust that you're working with good people. Certainly, if you're a jeweler, you need to trust that people are going to hold on to this very precious merchandise without absconding. So I think there is sort of this built-in understanding that you work with people that you trust, that you care about, that and that extends even outside of people. I mean, I don't handle merchandise other than when we're doing a shoot. So it's not like anybody has to trust me with their goods, but I think that general vibe, that ethos just permeates the entire business. I think it is an industry built on trust, built on just, friendships, a lot of friendships, which is just such a wonderful thing,
Yeah. I mean, did you ever have any moment throughout the trajectory of a 22-year career where you considered doing something else or being in a different industry?
It's not so much different industries, although I suppose if you think about the industries that would be fun, like the spirits industry would be fun, the travel industry would be fun. But, you get I get so much travel in this business, and it's such an interesting lens onto the world. I mean, I've always thought jewelry, and I cover watches too, so there's a little more diversity there.
Hi, Elle Hill here. Do you want to learn how to get on the phone with any buyer that you want to work with without an introduction or a referral? Click to get the downloadable that we've made for you that you can start using right away and will be really useful for your business and growing your revenue.
I've always thought what a great way to look at the world. Because you get all the sort of major issues. You get, you talk about wealth, you talk about privilege, distribution, supply chain, sustainability, clearly on the FairMined topic. I mean, there's so many subjects that jewelry touches, or that touch jewelry, that I feel like it's a really interesting way to see the world. It's a little bit, it's sort of a wide lens. And again, with the travel, I mean, I've been to really all over the world, at least 60 countries just through jewelry. Well, I take that back. I've been to a lot of countries prior to doing jewelry because I was, like I said, I backpacked. And so I was always interested, but jewelry keeps me going back to a lot of really cool places. So I get to see the world, what more could you ask for?
And actually, I just got a telephone call today, and it was a Hong Kong number. And obviously I lived there for 9 years of my life. So I was like, oh, but it wasn't in my contacts, but I picked it up because I'm like, oh, who could it be? And I just had called a friend from Hong Kong, I think yesterday morning. And so I picked it up, and it was someone from the trade show that's now in Singapore saying, hi, we're just wondering if you're attending the show. And it's not on my radar. And I mean, there was a time when I first came over here, I was like, I can't go, I had to move a family of 6 from Hong Kong to here. I was like, I'll take a break, but I was back there, within a year. But, so what about that show? Like, will you go to that show?
To the Hong Kong show? You know what? I have not been to that show. Well, and I was actually just in Singapore before the pandemic. And I'd been to Singapore way back when. You know what? I used to go a little bit more to Asia. Clearly the pandemic changed all that. I love Asia. I absolutely adore Asia. Everywhere from, Japan to China to Southeast Asia. I mean, it's probably my number one region, all of that area. So I would go in a heartbeat. I used to go to the Hong Kong show. I've been to the one in March. I've been to the one in September. I've never been to a show in Singapore, but I have been to exhibitions. So, and I've been to the Bangkok show. So I guess I have done those shows, but they're not really regular parts of my beat. Partly because, a lot of those shows used to have press trips, or they'd sponsor media over there. And when they don't, I mean, JCK has a budget for travel, but not clearly a limitless budget. So we got to pick and choose. JCK I have to be at. When Basel World was a show, I would go to Switzerland every year. I still go to Switzerland to go to the watch fair in Geneva. But now that Basel World's not, a thing, which is very sad actually, because it was a great way to see not only jewelry and watches, but also just gemstone suppliers and equipment makers and all kinds. So I have a little less reason, I guess, to travel, because those events aren't happening, or the pandemic has curtailed them. But like the Istanbul show is great, the Brazil show is great. There's a lot of shows actually, a lot of cool shows, you know, Munich.
Yeah, I love that. That's the second time I've spoken at that show, and second time I've attended that show. And
Yeah.
I love it. But, you know,
Neat.
I'm also right here. You know, I live in England. So
Yeah.
like a hop, skip, and Vicenza. I'm now like all over Vicenza, like
Yeah.
wild rice. I really enjoy that show.
Yeah.
You know, but I think, like you said, when you're dealing with this industry, you're dealing with politics, you're dealing with, you know,
Economies, you know.
commodities, economy. It's such a, I make a joke, but it's actually true. I don't watch television. I don't watch television. I watch the jewelry industry because it's also a soap opera, right?
I mean, think about it. Sure. You know, we've got the greed and, you know, high stakes wealth and, like, you know, thieves and robberies and all kinds of dramatic things. I mean, if you, sometimes I watch a movie and I'm never surprised because there's almost always some jewelry exchange in a movie. Almost any movie, honestly, it could be anything, because it's either like somebody's getting married or their ring from their grandmother got lost, or some plot line that involves jewelry. Almost every single movie you could watch. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think people realize, because a lot of people, I think their first impression when I say I write about jewelry is, that's weird. And I think 20 years ago, had you asked me, would you still be writing about jewelry in 2022? And I'd say there's just no way. How could that be? And yet it is a world that, because of what we've just talked about, that because so many things touch it, and it touches so many, and it has such a resonance for people that it does sort of constantly feel like the world is being reinvented, because there's so many things going on and they all implicate jewelry in some way, or jewelry is implicated in them, you know?
Yeah. And I'm going to admit this to you. I remember when I was, you know, when I started out, I worked as a salesperson for the largest jewelry manufacturer in America, who served the majors, right? And I would come home to Andon International and M Fabricant and Sons.
So yeah, I remember.
Plum Club, you know, now Richline bought Andine, and Richline is still one of the biggest, and they acquired Andine. And I worked for Chuck Portgang and the gang at and the Portgang gang at M Fabricant. And so I sold to Sears and Mervyn's and, you know, Macy's West, when there was a Macy's West, like back in the day, in late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember, like, on the weekend, thinking, like, you know, what I do doesn't really, like, you know, I just, like, it's all about how many million did I sell? How many million did I sell? And I would say to myself, well, there's people in the factories, and the more I sell, the people in the factories have work. And this was it's like hanging by a thread, like, of there's value and there's something bigger in what I'm doing that I was kind of searching for. Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah, that I didn't really get all the way there, but that was the Band-Aid I put on it. So that's part of why when Hill and Company launched, we said we work with responsibly sourced businesses. That was our tagline. Because I knew from visiting over 178 factories, from the Dominican Republic to Place Vendôme to Shenzhen, Panyu, Shenda, that there was a wide range of, and it was more about the human rights in my mind, right? Totally. It wasn't so much about toxicity or mercury or artisanal gold miners. It was more about humanitarian rights. So that is one of the reasons why I started asking the questions and started aligning, you know, sidling up to people. Like I first met Iris van der Vecken, for example, in Botswana in 2019.
Cool.
She had I met her at JCK that year because she was just appointed. This was back when she was with the RJC. And then I was at the De Beers Symposium or whatever it is down in Botswana. And I was like, want to have a glass of Chardonnay? Because I wanted to learn more about, you know, what was this, you know, because it was still, you know, that it's accelerated so swiftly which is great, with pandemic. I think everybody got a little more conscious about how we're all interconnected and it all matters. So that's
Agreed.
part of why when the FairMined 100 challenge came up, I said, okay, if there's any way that my voice can amplify this, I would like to. And by the way, like the first gal who I interviewed was one of the team. And I was like, what do you guys really do? I know the goal is to create a better environment for artisanal miners, to create communities. I think I didn't even know that part, but I was able to ask her a lot of questions about what they do. I still don't know it all, of course, but I was impressed. I didn't realize that they are on the ground where pockets of sole trader, independent artisanal miners are. It was just an opportunity to learn, basically. And I was really surprised at how much they do. I didn't realize it. I thought this was it was a learning for me that they could do 1 or 2 pieces, or, that they didn't have to, I don't know, you just get stuck in a thought. And because of my experience with Futura jewelry, which is 100% mercury-free mined, FairMined ecological gold certified, it didn't occur to me, sounds silly, that, somebody could do some with it, with FairMined certified gold and not everything, or just do a small collection. I don't know why that never occurred to me.
We've been having this conversation about sustainability and ethical sourcing, responsible sourcing. I remember the first time I recall having any sort of conversation around it was back in 2002. And it was mostly, the conflict diamond issue had come up. So clearly there was a focus on diamonds. And I remember, because I was writing about gemstones at the time, we were talking about the sourcing of gemstones, and that's still a really thorny issue. But gold and diamonds, still very much a thing we need to figure out how to do better. But the industry has been talking about this for over 20 years. There's certainly been progress, and the pandemic, as you said, did underscore the importance of all this stuff and, kind of fast track these issues a bit more. But we've been, it's a very fragmented industry. So it's really, really hard to get a lot of collective support behind these things, because there's so many players, so many different, it's not only is it fragmented globally, it's fragmented even domestically, in the sense that there are still so many different players and not that many, there are a number of handful of big companies, but it's not like they're all dominant. We don't live under a cartel anymore in terms of the De Beers cartel. So, there's just a lot of different voices to incorporate into this conversation. And it's a challenge. It continues to be a challenge, but there is progress. So it's good. It's good. And there's a lot more, like Futura that you mentioned, a lot more really wonderful, super chic, stylish designers who understand the importance of this and have gone out of their way to get certified, to make sure their sourcing is, lined up and as clean as they can make it. So there's a lot of progress and a lot of reason to be optimistic, but it's long going. This has been a very, very drawn out conversation. So
I think in 2030, we're still going to be like, as I remember, I don't know, being on panels or doing stuff, in Asia while I was living over there, saying the consumer will answer a survey and say that they want it, but they will not vote with their wallet. And then I remember like not reporting, I'm not a reporter, but, saying when I started, because I consume voraciously all of the diamond reports and the McKinsey and the data and everything. And I remember saying, they're starting to vote with their wallets. And look, consumer demand is, a huge accelerator of anything, right? Because that's who's paying for it at the end of the day. But I think like the consumer, and maybe thanks to Leonardo DiCaprio, still, they understand diamonds and there can be questions. I don't think they understand that there is, challenges with precious metal as well. I don't think it's on the radar yet.
Agreed. There's, sort of these documentaries that come up, or New York Times will do a big sort of expose about dirty gold. But I don't think they've reached that level of consumer awareness that a movie like Blood Diamond can do in a single year. I think people a lot of times, Gen Z is changing this, Gen Z is definitely changing the stakes of this conversation. It's a much more, connected generation, a much more social generation, a we generation, a generation of young people who feel like collectively they have a lot of power, and they do. And so things are changing. I mean, Gen Z obviously was just being born when I entered this industry, which is crazy, but okay. So, I think the pandemic, Gen Z, all these sort of accelerants are changing this, and we will see a lot of progress. And clearly the UN and its Sustainable Development Goals 2030, I mean, that is a target, and it's, 8 years, less than 8 years now. So I do think we'll see a lot more progress in the next 5 to 8 years. Yeah. But just, having these conversations a lot and encouraging consumers to notice. I mean, that is a huge challenge, but I do think Gen Z is going to help, and social media and just the way that we can communicate and share what we're doing is clearly none of this existed 20 years ago. So just the ways that we can amplify our messaging, all that is going to help.
I agree with you completely. And if there is a silver lining for everything that's been going on the past couple of years, I think it is that there's that acceleration towards, being really mindful about everything we're consuming, and how it affects the planet. And lucky us that we get to do that in the midst of this really like fraternal industry. I mean, I think I feel off of you like what I have a picture of a man in a blazer with a t-shirt underneath it that says "Jewelry is my life." Oh, and, I will secretly say to you, like, I'm wearing jewelry,
right?
And I am so fastidious about what I acquire because we see everything, right?
Yeah.
And I usually say to people, I can't afford all the stuff I really want.
No, me neither.
But I'm also really, really picky. Like, I'm not a voracious consumer even of jewelry because I want it to be, it's that product. It's so imbued with like affection and sentimentality, like more than handbag, or anything. So, but I love that poster that I have, and I post it every now and then online that says jewelry saved my life or something like that. Because they do. So cool. I'm a workaholic. So all my friends, were gathered and collected over years and continents because I get the luxury of meeting people like you, Victoria. Like, I have an excuse. I'm like, I've always wanted to know where I'm going to have this because we both, look, no matter what, it does take some time to be involved in something like, judging the FairMined 100 challenge. But we both, at least we had that in common, right? That,
Sure.
we felt like, let's do this because you have a name that everyone in the industry knows. So, people watch what they know. It's true. So, thank you very much for taking the time to chat about where you are in the industry and how you and I will support the FairMined 100 challenge. And I hope this isn't the last time we connect.
Oh, no, of course it won't be. No, I can't imagine it would be, but no, thank you. It's an honor. I mean, this is the FairMined organization, and the standard is just one of the best out there, if not the best. And I'm honored and thrilled to be able to shine a little bit of light on it or help. And I mean, the more designers that I see using it, it's like, I just want to feature them more. Honestly, the incentive for designers is, eventually you're going to get more press because this is the kind of thing that the media wants to emphasize and promote. And the more press you get, hopefully the sales will follow and the more retailers will come. And so I think there is a real, kind of come on the bandwagon here because all the cool kids are here. So why not come on over? So yeah, I'm thrilled to be a part of it, and just, thank you to FairMined for asking me.
I know, and giving me an excuse to talk to you.
Exactly. No, I love it. I'd love to chat over a glass of wine someday. So I'll plan on
the Aperol spritz is on me.
Okay, I will not let you forget that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Victoria. I really appreciate
Thank you, Elle. Such a pleasure.
Like that video, you're gonna love the next one. It's full of our expertise and tips on diamonds, gemstones, and jewelry, growing your top line revenue and business strategy. Just click on the link, subscribe, and hit the bell button so that you'll be notified of our next videos, and give us a like. Bye for now.